we are digging a little bit deeper into the problem space of connecting then connected. We had a fabulous session just now, which actually explored that how do you actually bring opportunity to Bharat. And it was interesting to see the diverse perspective being brought to the discussion table by people from industry, also from academia as well as government. And then you realize the enormity of the problem. But then you also realize that, okay, there is a large opportunity to be actually had here. And if you can solve this connecting the unconnected problem, not only it will work in India, but it will also work in Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, you name it. Even, countries like Sweden, I know there are places which are quite unconnected in terms of physically, although they're digitally well connected. But the new technologies that are coming to the table, AI, 5G, the way the computing and communication is merging, actually promises a new paradigm shift. And to discuss that, what could be the possible potential technology models as well as business model that could emerge around it, I would like to invite the panel members for me here. I would like to invite on stage Abhishek Singh, CEO MyGov, and also AS Meti. He's also the CEO for Digital India Corporation as well. I would also like to invite on stage Dr. Himanshu Tyagi from Indian Institute of Science. He's also running a very interesting startup called Bannon Intelligence. Then we have a couple of people joining in online, and this is a true digital physical perspective as we call it. So we have Lalitesh Katragadda, founder Indihood. He's joining online. I hope he's doing well. He was having some challenges with his health, but he's finally here. We also have Shailesh Kumar, Chief Data Scientist, Center of Excellence, AI and ML, joining in from Geo. Hi, Shailesh. Glad to have all of you here. And thanks a lot for making it. I know it was a short duration in terms of notice, but thanks a lot. We are all here. So I would actually like to start with Abhishek ji here, because since he has literally a bird's eye view from Delhi, and he has been actually looking at some of the digital initiatives that Government of India is going and taking into the deeper parts, because government, for us, in terms of I look at my stint as a venture capitalist, I may have to bother about only 50 or 100 million people, but government in its truest sense has to bother about 1.3 billion people, and it's always a tough ask. So would love to learn from him, like, when you actually had looked at this problem from a government scale, we are talking about billions of scale, what are the lessons or things that you've learned that we could actually take into account when you're trying to build the technology model for such services?
Thank you, Umakant. And as you rightly said, the key challenge whenever we're designing a technology solution for public services or for something that the government is implementing, it remains the scale. Like, how do you ensure that whatever works in the lab or whatever works in a POC or whatever works in a limited way also works as efficiently and as with the same user experience when it's scaled up to 1 billion people. So managing the scale becomes the foremost requirement. And for that, whether it has been, Vivek is here, whether it was the Aadhaar project, or whether it was the Arogya Setu, Lalitesh is here, or whether it was the COVID vaccination platform or the DigiLocker platform that we have built in, everywhere the objective has been to design it in such a way, to architect in such a way that the system, the online service will function even when billions of people are accessing it at the same time. I remember the vaccination platform, initially there were some glitches when it was launched, but on one particular day in September, when it reached to almost it was what, 2.5 crores, 25 million people accessed it on one particular day, and the number of API hits were going in the excess of thousands per second. So then we were all worried, and it became like one key example in which the whole belief that architecting it right becomes very important. Using cloud first. Cloud first has been the motto, like have a scalable system so that we are able to provide the same user experience when millions of people are accessing or lesser number of people are accessing. The second key component is that we find that 90% of people in India access e-services through mobiles. So mobile first approach, so designing it for the mobile and ensuring that it also works with the web interface, that has been a key objective. The third key thing that becomes very important in designing such systems is to build up a API-based interface so that different systems need to connect with each other. And that also brings to the most important part, like a citizen-centric design. Like, how do we ensure that whatever we are designing is designed from the point of view of the citizen and not from the point of view of the government departments in which we are bifurcated on. Very often we start thinking it like, I am Panchayati Raj department, so I do these X, Y, Z, and that's how I will design it. Or I am running the tuberculosis program, so I design this from my perspective. But a citizen doesn't look at government in the sectors in which we are bifurcated in. Citizens looks at government as a whole. So while for operational purposes, government is divided into several departments and divisions, but ultimately to provide a true citizen experience, we need to have an API-based system in which different systems talk to each other. To have the right data standards, metadata standards, make systems talk to each other, and ensure that citizens are able to access services seamlessly across departments without having to go from portal to portal or app to app. So that's the few key learnings that we have got from implementing solutions at a scale.
I think this is fantastic. Since you talked about the societal scale systems that we need, and the number that you mentioned around the COVID platform, the numbers were amazing. I mean, in fact, I was in Sweden and talking about that. How many people we are trying to vaccinate each day. It was more than the population of Sweden, and this was phenomenal because today we are here, even though we are following COVID protocols, but we still are able to make it pandemic and an endemic, and that's a phenomenal achievement that has taken place. And the other part that you talked about, the citizen-centric design of the foundational technology, I think that is a very interesting perspective that you shared. And on that cue, I would like to bring in Lalitesh, who's been working at billion-plus scale in Google Maps, and would love to actually get his perspective that, if you were to look at cloud first, mobile first, and maybe on the edge first model, what would that technology foundation look like? Because, we have really young researchers and also, young innovators out here. So if they have to design something, what they should look at?
Thanks, Umakant. I would like to, commend Abhishek on, his co-creation of CoWIN, which he has done with his colleague Debabrata and others. And he was very humble in saying that it had problems initially. And I was very much involved in the early days. So I knew that the problems were literally being resolved in real time, right? I think it is one of the natures of large systems is they will have early hiccups, and we should be open to that and welcome those. And within days, they had resolved all of them, and it became a massively scalable system. To answer your question, Umakant, I don't think there is any doubt about the tenets that Abhishek laid out. For development to happen, it has to be cloud first. It has to be API first, right? And it has to be highly scalable. But the other, I think there are two more things we have to worry about. In addition to the previous panel, which talked about, making sure it works in Indic, and also making sure that, it is designed for offline and online, which I think is a very fundamental phenomenon that happens. And if you want to connect the unconnected, and if you want it to work for 1.3 billion people, the other fundamental tenet that we have to bring in is, move the computing to the edge and move the knowledge to the edge, right? And this is already happening, by the way. If you have children who play games, and people have tried to run games remotely and connect it by a terminal, they don't work. Your game has to render locally. If you're using maps, Quietly, the map caches everything on the phone and it renders the map tiles locally. It actually gets a very small amount of vector data, and the rich, colored map that you see is actually rendered locally, right? And the map is there so that if you get off the airport and you don't have internet connection, your map still works, right? Now when we create artifacts like digital rupee, right? And and one of Abhishek's unsung but greatest creations, I believe, digital locker. When that starts becoming ubiquitous, which it will, right? You cannot say that, look, I can only share my identity with you when I'm online and when you are online, and if you don't have an online connection, then we have to wait, right? That's not going to work. So we have to create systems which are as secure, and it is possible, as secure as they are when you are connected, and have stuff like DigiLocker and all our artifacts work both locally and globally. And the final piece I would like to talk about is security, right? All technology advancements begin with deep use cases in defense and security. And General Narvane has been saying recently about the evolution of the electronic warfare and why indigenous is important and so on. And if you look at the security scenario, it is like a fractal, right? If you want to be secure and if you want to be safe and thriving as an economy, when, let's say, strife breaks out, all of our data has to be local in India, for example, and that goes all the way. It has to be local in India, and it probably has to be local in every circle, and it has to be local on my phone. And I need to be empowered with the data. And only then will we be able to, do development on the edge and have security systems that work on the edge. And of course, in the modern theater warfare, with the combination of geospatial, AI, and computing, you cannot do that kind of computing on the cloud. The cloud is almost a backup. The element of computing, the actor of computing, is the physical entity that is carrying the computing and connected locally, and the communication itself has to be local. So you have this paradigm of sensor fusion in time and space that kind of comes to life when you think about both commercial, social, and security applications.
That was really insightful. Thanks, Lalitesh, for that perspective. And that actually looks at from when we are designing applications, right? And how do we make sure that it is edge first in some sense, right? And not only the computing, but also the information resides there so that we actually have, in some sense, the ability to degrade gracefully if we need to. And that brings to the other point, which is about accessing it or accessing such services on the other side, which is where I would love to actually ask Shailesh, since he's actually involved very closely with Geo and some of the experiments that they're doing, right? Like, how do we bring the bar of accessibility down in terms of devices, in terms of adding language support, in terms of so that once we actually have this kind of solutions built in, we don't actually so we need to look at the full chain, right? Like from where people are creating applications to where people are accessing it in terms of the whole, and then going down to like, okay, somebody has to enable the infrastructure as well, right? So I would love to ask from you, like, how are you seeing this whole device evolution? And we need to look at, different price points and things like that, and how do we enable it?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel. So let me step back a little bit and talk about how the evolution of AI in the last 20 years and the next 20 years is happening from a point of view of inclusion and connectivity. Right? So AI has addressed multiple winters already, right? Like the compute winter, the frameworks winter, now the connectivity winter because of edge computing. We are getting into AI at the edge, delivery winter with all the devices that people have. We can deliver AI solutions to the masses, right? So we have addressed multiple winters. And in the last 20 years, we have only scratched the surface of some very amazing use cases, right? Whether it is search engines, maps, ad engines, sales and marketing. And now in the last 5 years, we have started to see the evolution of the next 5 winters we are going to address through AI, right? So the first one is the use case winter, which I think of it as a use case winter. And now that we have solved some of the commercial use cases very well, we are now ready to solve some of the social use cases, and that's where this conference is very important. And we are already seeing with the Niti Aayog paper all the way till now, and where the evolution of every big company is also having. The use case winter is being addressed, and we are not just a compute company anymore, or a telecom company anymore, or a data company anymore. We are driven by use cases more than technology. And the use cases are driving us towards social use cases, right? Whether it's healthcare, agriculture, and we are going to see the next 20 years is going to become more of that while we continue to build our core capabilities. The second winter that we are going to really need to address, and this is what I call the integration winter, which is we have built a lot of bottom-up systems, right? UPI by itself is an API collection, Aadhaar is another, and all that. But we are going to need a lot more and many more such bottom-up systems which do individual AI APIs. But we are going to need an integration platform, right? The kinds, the Lalit and those kind of people will have to help us think through how to integrate all of that, so that how do we, for example, within healthcare, how do we integrate the labs and the hospitals and the devices and all of that? In agriculture, how do we integrate all the sensors and the supply chain and the chemicals and all of that, right? In education, how do we integrate all the content and the students and the teachers and the homeworks, right? So integration is going to be our next 20-year journey. And we need to think very top-down about every social ecosystem and think about integration while we think about bottom-up APIs. The third winter that I think we need to address is the democratization winter, which is really, like wealth, AI is still, sitting with few very large organizations. But how do we enable every, a lot of people to kind of consume and produce AI, right? So how do I bring in a student who's doing a BTech project in a very niche area, who has built a great model on something very important? How do I make sure that that is available to all the farmers or hospitals with few clicks of a button, right? So how do we bridge the gap between production and consumption of AI and democratize it? I don't just mean in terms of languages and all that, but Uberization of AI in another platform, right? That's something that I'm sure Abhishek ji and others are thinking about. Inclusion winter, we talked about. How do we not build products for the urban elite and then think of everybody else as an afterthought? And now that we heard a lot of speakers talk about inclusion first, AI first products. So when we launch, it is available in all Indian languages, and we don't add other languages later. And with all the companies working in language technologies and all that, and speech technologies, we are very much on path to address the inclusion winter. And the last winter is the skill winter. And I think we are seeing a shortage of skills. And unless we not only increase the quantity and quality, but also the nature of the skill set. So the nature of the skill set is very important, which we'll talk about later. And I think Geo Institute and many institutes are now working on AI capabilities. Once all these winters are also addressed, I think we're going to have a very beautiful connected ecosystem where everybody in the country is connected and benefiting from the digital bandwagon. But we have a long way to go, and I hope that, I think that a lot of us are thinking very in resonance in that direction, and such conferences are amazing to be part of. Thank you.
Shailesh, I think this is a wonderful summary of how inclusion first also need to be added to the list, right? When we're talking about societal scale AI, or really taking the technology foundation to the unconnected. And in fact, one of the big challenges that I see, and I was talking about this in the morning, that we went and met Speaker Honorable Hegde ji, who's the Speaker for Karnataka State Assembly, and he pointed out first thing that, hey, I am from Sirsi, and which is Uttar Kannada district, and I don't have connectivity, and if I don't have connectivity, I can't promise the next level of digital jobs to my people. And without those jobs, people will migrate to Bangalore. I mean, there is no way I could actually stop them, or I should not stop them, because they anyway should probably lead to a better quality of life. So how do we solve that last mile accessibility problem? Because I'm also part of one of the committees where we're looking at the whole universal SaaS service obligation SaaS that we have, and can we put it to use in terms of R&D to actually really look at like what is the bottleneck, right? What is the bottleneck? We have BharatNet connecting villages and all of that, but at the end node we still don't have connectivity, right? So while we build inclusion first solution, but if they don't have connectivity, they won't be able to actually access that. So with that question in mind, I would like to ask Himanshu, Tyagi, that do you see some solution on horizon, or do you have some inking, or how can we solve that?
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so first about BharatNet. BharatNet has already reached about 1.5 lakh, 2 lakh gram panchayat. Right, and the target is 2.5 lakh, all the gram panchayats by 2023. So that's tremendous. But if you look at the access side of it, which in India case mostly comes from mobile, as we discussed. So the last mile, which can be Wi-Fi or even cellular, but let's say Wi-Fi. There are only 1 lakh Wi-Fi hotspots on BharatNet right now, out of which 50,000 are active. Total data that has been downloaded is about 5,000 terabyte till now, which is not that high. On the other side also, there's an interesting scheme called PM Vani, which has come up, which is very exciting, which is now trying to get BharatNet and other such fiber connectivity to further deliver bandwidth to the last person by allowing vendors to sell that bandwidth further. So they'll have to register on this PM Vani platform, and then they can sell it further. So these mechanisms are now available. In fact, PM1 is tremendous. These kind of reselling of bandwidth has been regulated across the globe, and it has been allowed in this Wi-Fi space. That's tremendous. This is your analogy, which I really like. This is like the cable operator movement of our Wi-Fi connectivity, of our wireless connectivity. This will be, I think, very, very successful. Having said that, it's all the connectivity situation is still dismal. And the question is, what can be done there? And one of the things I have been approaching in my research and also entrepreneurial exploits is bringing in the community to deliver the bandwidth. Bringing in the community to deliver the bandwidth, and also community to consume the bandwidth together. So I think along with Wi-Fi at the last mile, we need to see even cellular base stations coming up in the either private 5G space. Hopefully some spectrum will be released for private 5G as well. And this has been around, this talk has been around. Jio was also involved in this around 2017, but they haven't come up. And these base stations have to be dedicated to those communities. Gram Panchayat should have their own base stations to serve their Gram Panchayat thing. Wi-Fi is great because of various things, but all said and done, Wi-Fi at long range won't be a great success. It won't give you all the experience that we are needed. Having the cellular last mile will really help. That's one part of it. Second part of it is how do we engage the community? And there have been experiments across the world. We are trying to do one more here in India. Blockchain is amazing for that. Build a community around a token which is to encourage people to build networks. Okay, this community-driven network building. Helium is a great example. It's a LoRa network which has been driven by blockchain. It is 500,000 hotspots strong. LoRa is a technology which everyone was crazy about, but never took off actually. The biggest LoRa network in the world right now is Helium, which is just a crowdsourced network. Okay, and they have 500,000 hotspots already and growing tremendously. 500,000 is a very small number for Indian ecosystem. If we are able to excite the people Misho is reaching out to participate in such an effort, this will be amazing, I think. I think so all bandwidth available across Wi-Fi, cellular should converge through various ways. We have to be cognizant of how companies like Jio, Airtel, Vodafone, BSNL, who are capital intensive, they have their limitations in what they can offer. Bringing up this other parallel community which can operate at very low wafer thin margins will be, I think, a very important step to bridge this gap.
I think that's a very interesting perspective that you're bringing to the table of looking at community to actually power the last mile access. And that's actually kind of very interesting because if you look at the cost of customer care at the last mile is what probably prevents a lot of telcos from offering it, right? Like the cost of customer care is roughly around 10% coupled with low ARPU. It's not financially viable for them to do that. But what if they, collaborate together with the community and they open it up and it's like this, right? Like, so I'm getting 1 gigabit of speed, Gbps of speed, and I'm using only 100 Mbps, and rest I can sell, and of course, I barter, the interesting thing with 5G is that it actually allows for value-based slicing as well, right? And that's actually interesting because we could actually build some very innovative pricing models based on that as well. I mean, do you want to throw some light on that? I mean,
yeah, so another amazing thing which is happening in 5G, which many here would know, is that it's a completely service-based architecture. And there is a parallel O-RAN standard also coming in. So what one can imagine is that what the services that we are building for other things, this great platform that we are learning about this morning, similar platforms can come over network, and you can build applications very easily. So once you can build applications, you can do fancy things with applications. You can have this slicing, which can do what is called intent-based networking, where slices, I don't even have to specify the specs. I say the intent is to get good video quality. Okay, that's my intent. Give me a slice which gives me good video quality. Don't ask me what throughput, what latency, what jitter. Okay, these are numbers which some SLA has to be filled with, but I want good network quality. And can we enable that and enable network resources across edge and the backend which enable those resources? All those technological advances are happening. So it is left to the creativity of application builders now, if this ecosystem emerges, to use them in the right way to serve the purpose that you are pointing to.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be interesting if, a farmer is able to leverage the drones for probably spraying and, they pay based on, what they get out of it. And then, so that in turn makes sure that everybody makes money or everybody is incentivized to make money. So the community-based approach is very interesting, and actually I would love to ask Abhishek ji, because, of course, with the government, I mean, if you look at the government, it's actually fundamentally a very large cooperative. 1.36 billion people, we all pay taxes. It's fundamentally a cooperative. And then through that, they enable various things, which is for welfare of all of us. And so would love to understand from him what kind of business models, we can, think about or, to support such technology foundations that might be coming up.
Yeah, in fact, tend to agree with what was just mentioned. Like, how do we involve the community in taking the connectivity forward and ensuring that if we have to connect villages in remote areas and in distant areas also and offer the same quality of services. The BharatNet project is a great project which is taking the fiber down to the villages. But what happens after the fiber is terminated? It should not become something like what happened in the electrification when it was done. Like we remember like around 10, 20 years back when villages were electrified, there will be a pole, there will be a transformer, there will be wires, but there will be no electricity, or there will be no users of electricity. Till the Saubhagya scheme was launched in, wherein said that we don't only have to electrify villages, but we have to provide actual electricity connections to households and let people start using electricity. And then only the objective of an electrified village is completed. Similarly, when we are doing connectivity with BharatNet, just terminating the fiber at the boundary of a village is not the objective. We need to connect the important institutions in a village, whether it's the primary school or the middle or the high school or the sub-center or the primary health center or the Anganwadi center, the Panchayat Bhavan, and also connect a few households with the fiber. But why will a household take a connection? They need to feel the need of it. So if there are services which are bundled along with that, if there are like what Vidit was mentioning in Misho, like if there are enterprises, small enterprises, self-help groups, which can set up a shop on an e-commerce platform without requiring the GST registration, which he was mentioning, that will ensure that every artisan or every household also feels that getting a connectivity adds some value to his business. and then it will happen. If a parent thinks that getting access to online resources helps in learning about in the learning of his kids, if he feels that there are telemedicine solutions with which he can get connected to hospitals and access healthcare from his village, so then when all these things happen, then there will be a demand side push for connectivity, and then people would be taking more connectivity, which will happen that. So that would involve the community at a large in trying to access these services. But till that happens, we also have something, the network of common service centers that that we have established, and that has been the core part of the e-governance strategy right from the beginning. Because when the National E-Governance Plan was approved and implemented in 2006, it was felt that majority of people will not have the means to access online services. Either they will not have access to a device or a smartphone, or they will not have access to connectivity, or they will not have the skills to in fact navigate a portal or an online service. So these common service centers were set up in a public-private partnership model run by village-level entrepreneurs whose value they get is by offering the services they are there. We have a network of 400,000 such centers across the country. So can these centers, these common service centers, become the catalyst for expanding services? They have been a part of the BharatNet strategy. Most of them are also becoming PM Wani outlets, wherein they are providing the connectivity that they have in a wireless mode around their center, plus also taking part in digital skilling. The PMG Disha program, which seeks to provide digital saksharta to rural areas, they're implementing that program also. So such entrepreneur-driven initiatives can become a very key part of expanding the services. And again, I would like to emphasize what was mentioned earlier, like the inclusion aspect. Like if we have to really build services, how do we ensure that we are enabling services through various languages and also through the voice mode? Because we already have around 700 million people connected, but if you have to get the remaining 500 million people onto the internet, they might not be literate in the sense that we look at literacy. They might be wanting to access services in their mother tongue through voice. Today, technology allows that to happen. So when that happens, that will again push the demand side for connectivity, and all these things will ultimately help us in connecting the unconnected. So it's extending the outreach of fiber, expanding the demand, and also enabling services through various languages and through voice mode. So these are some of the thoughts which I think are very, very critical for...
Fantastic. I think, absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head in that sense that, the democratization of even service building has to be there. And with that perspective, actually, I would like to ask Lalitesh to dig into it. Like when we are talking about, in some sense, community-powered communication and cloud, right? And you basically bring the threshold down for somebody to create a mobile app, somebody to create a service. Maybe Gram Panchayat can, create its own service to collect the taxes, or maybe share, the resources that they might actually have. Now, how do we enable that to happen so that they are not just consumers of service, but they're actually creating their own services? And that's a perspective that will actually truly democratize access, because all said and done, maybe sitting in Bangalore may not know all the problems to solve. Maybe for some problem it might look like that, hey, it's a very small problem to solve, I can't fund it, there's no business model around it. But maybe an entrepreneur in a rural area might think that, okay, this is a problem worth solving because it affects his life, and maybe that problem could probably find echo with respect to others as well. So would love to ask Lalitesh, what would that version of community cloud look like?
I think there are the basics we talked about that are necessary. See, for computing to work everywhere, you need computing in people's hands, so you need the processing power. And today, a $5 to $10 chip has the necessary processing power, to the point where we are now confident that a $10 chip can have all the power and memory necessary to hold a complete Indic model and process both speech and translation on the fly, right? Which also leads to the privacy angle, where the data never needs to leave your device, right? So computing, I think, is happening. Democratization of computing is happening, and with large Indian innovators like Jio rolling out these devices which are focused on the mainstream. By the way, the Apple for the 6 billion people on the planet has not yet happened. I think it is most likely going to happen from India, right? And the second part, which we have discussed in detail, is communication, right? I think communication needs to be a jugalbandi, right? Because even if you have the community-based edge stuff work, what is often overlooked is fiber is still the carrier, right? There is no way around it. I mean, no, you can do all the last mile you want, but unless you have multiple gigabits, not one, but multiple gigabits landing in every village, there is no way every child in that village can access world-class education, which requires anywhere from 5 to 10 megabits per second. And every PHC will need 100 megabits per second. So the bandwidth demand is extraordinary. And there is a rule I like to use, which I co-created with my advisor, Professor Raj Reddy, that every 10 years of education reduces your bandwidth need for the same task by a factor of 10. So if you want to do the same task, and you are less educated, you actually need more bandwidth. So the bandwidth need on the edge is immense. So you need fat pipes, you need slicing and dicing of local 5G, and you probably need the telecom guys playing the biller role, because it's very easy to create community-based self-serve ecosystems, as long as there is a unified national scale set of billing layers, which only the telecom guys can provide, right? Government cannot provide that, and the local guys cannot provide that, right? But if you take care of that, then the application layer becomes an issue, right? We cannot use the cloud paradigm anymore, right? I'm saying here that the cloud paradigm is not going to solve computing at the edge. The cloud is going to become a backup, and in almost a secure backup of my data, so I don't lose my data. And the cloud is also going to become an accounting layer. See, traditionally, the cloud is a manifestation of the mainframe. It's a distributed manifestation of the traditional mainframe. And if you remember, mainframes were used for company-wide aggregations of data. And even today, the bulk of the computing happens on people's desktops in corporations, right? And that has to happen here. So if that is going to happen here, the application layers have to be, like you said, co-created. They have to be community created, community dispersed, and community managed, where the difference is that unlike Excel, these have to be highly connected. And unlike social media, these have to be highly curated. So that is a fundamental difference. You cannot have data systems which are free for all. Like, for example, if you look at YouTube comments or Facebook posts, they are information, but they are not data and high curated data based on which you can make decisions. So people cannot run their lives on that. So that layer of collective intelligence being brought to life, where you create a digital twin of the world, where what is happening offline is mirrored in the online portion, but it is mirrored in a set of edge devices which are sharing that digital twin. When you do paradigms like that, it becomes possible. But the difficult part, the computer science challenge, which is the one I enjoy, the computer science challenge is, can you now make those platforms be created by the community? Because the simple insight, one of the reasons why the 1.1 billion people in India are not as developed as 200 million of us is because of a very simple reason, that they do not have all the uniform structures that we enjoy, like a college degree, a HR profile, and a bank account that works fully, and a income that happens monthly. We do not, the people on the edge don't have all of that. Their income flows are dramatically different. Their information flows are different. The information they have is in their head. It is not even written down. So I imagine India to be something like 5,000 communities of a few 100,000 people each, and each of them needs different platforms, which, not that you use the word may, I'm going to say that it is not that Bangalore may not be able to imagine. Bangalore will not be able to imagine what they need. It is simply not possible. And the only way we can democratize it without creating a digital feudal system is that communities create and own their own digital platforms. I will end with a very simple insight. From the 15th century to almost the 19th century, reading and writing was used as a feudal device, because printing, reading, and writing was in the hands of a few. And I'm hoping the digital era does not end up in that space for a few hundred years. If you want to, make digital as useful and ubiquitous as reading and writing became, we have to make the creation of digital platforms as easy as pencil, paper, and eraser. Right, and that is a metaphor we need to drive towards. Panchayats need to be able to own their own, paper and pencil and eraser.
Yeah, thanks for that insight. I think paper and eraser and pencil, I mean, there are very useful analogies to have when, we are trying to design these systems. And that brings me to the, the question for Shailesh, because we have really enthusiastic people, not just joining in from Indian Institute of Science, but also from 25 other hubs that have been created with respect to IITs and triple IITs. So this could be a message for all of them. Like if they have to think about a future, especially in technology, where they might be expected to create such solutions, from a skill perspective, what are the lessons that you are seeing that you would like to share with them?
So, Lalitesh made some very, very interesting comment. I love the way he gave that analogy. And, to make this work, right, the onus is on the people who can create such systems, and the skill sets that we are going to need are very different, right? The skill sets we have been acquiring so far as technologists, right, as data scientists are very different. How to build a model, how to deploy a model and all that. But as I look at the, how AI and technology has become automated almost, right? You can take a picture of a screen and create an app. So that is easy, right? You can auto-train a machine learning model. That is easy. What is the hard problem now is not that we cannot build a model and deploy a model. That is not the hard problem. The hard problem is, we don't know what the use cases are, right? We cannot keep solving the same old use cases forever. There are, like Lalitesh said, the use cases of Bangalore and the villages of India are very different. So the first skill is the design thinking skill has to be an integral part of a data science course, because we don't want technologists to become technology first thinkers, but pain point first, people first thinkers, right? And that is a very important skill. And, IITs don't teach them. We just learn physics, math, chemistry, and just go for it and innovate. We publish papers, but we need to work backwards from citizens and, go to villages, figure out the problems in every domain, whether it is healthcare and, energy sector, pollution. There are so many interesting problems that are out there. We cannot just think of the 5 core problems with Facebook, Google, and Amazon and all that. There are so many other problems to work on. So one is we need to really expand our horizon of how AI will be applied and what are my design thinking skills I need to develop. How do I approach, backward from, people and problem statements and not forward from technology? The second is, instead of building models, I think we need to migrate to building solutions and then work backward. So instead of saying, I want to do a clustering model well or this, how do I first design the end-to-end solution for a vertical and say it's going to need some interpretation models, it's going to need some it's going to need some optimization, it's going to need all of that. How do I create an entire architecture first and then create APIs, right? So I call this integration first, deployment first, and improvement later, or even development later, right? So how do I put the APIs first, integrate them, make them run on, and then work backward and say, now there are millions of data scientists that will come from all parts of the country and the world. They can keep improving those APIs over time, which is easier part now once the data and compute is available. But who is going to put together the solution is going to be the next thing we need. So solution thinking and system thinking are very important parts of a data science thinking now. It's not just about model thinking and data thinking. So I think those are the next set of skill sets. And I'll just give some examples. We figured out that if we want to do healthcare well, it's not that we have to solve the X-ray to COVID problem. We also have to solve some very interesting problems like how do we diagnose a disease? And today, if you look at the diagnosis burden of the country, right, tier 1 cities may have very good doctors, but if you look at tier 2, tier 3, there are no doctors. People are dying because of wrong diagnosis in the first place. So we said, let's address that problem, right? And solve that, because we understood the pain point that a cure starts with the correct diagnosis. So identifying such problems. Another, paradigm shift we can make in education, for example, which is, how do I think of digital physical education very differently? People don't go to schools anymore to listen to a teacher. They already learn from digital, and they go to school only to play football and do hackathons and build startups and create solutions. They don't go to school to learn anymore. Why are we still going back to school in the classroom mode? We lost a huge opportunity after COVID by saying, let's all get together in a school and there's a teacher again, right? How can we not do flip classrooms and become innovation kind of schools instead of teaching kind of schools, right? So I think this massive disruption is possible in all sectors if technology people who know how technology works and what is possible also wear the hat of a product manager or a product thinker or a solution thinker, because somebody has to bridge that gap. And the people who will bridge that gap is what the key skill set is required. You need to understand problem statements and technology at the same time and put it together. So I think that is where the next generation skill set will be, and hopefully we'll get there and create amazing solutions for the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Shailesh, for the wonderful insight of starting with the problem first and then figuring out how to solve it, and we can arrange technology tools around it. And it's been a big challenge, and it's also been a big learning, because when you come from innovation world, probably that is something that comes really early to you, but then you realize that when we're talking about academia, probably that is not a skill that we've been teaching in our schools, and I think probably we need to start teaching that. I mean, that's amazing feedback. We're almost running out of time here, so would love to take up a couple of questions from the audience. They've been sitting very patiently and not fidgeting in their seats. So anybody who would like to ask any question, please raise your hand. We'll try to get a mic to you. Mike, you can just stand and I'll try to repeat.
Anyone in the panel. So we've been we've been hearing the esteemed panel speak about how, for example, you have fiber streaming bandwidth to the villages. There is slicing of the available 5G, into which different purpose-built apps could be maybe made by the community, made by others for the purpose of consumption by the community, right? So different apps get streamed. I see companies like Airtel, like Jio, really being at the center of making this revolution possible, right? And I see a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs, solution builders, the way Shailesh has described, building apps which can be streamed on this platform, which can be made available for consumption by anyone who is, what are some of the, let's say, app development ecosystems, right? So for example, we have the Jam stack, we have UIDI, we have the API stack for fintech, for various other such use cases. But for some of these use cases which 5G and rural can make possible, it could be ed, it could be medicine, it could be something else. For example, Umakant, you were talking about drone spraying app that a farmer could use. What are some of the integration backbone choices that are available? What are some of the, different players, what directions are they taking? If today I were to write an app which can sit on a Jio or an Airtel 5G and get streamed out, right, what choices do I have?
Well, who wants to have a go at it? Shailesh, Lalitesh, Himanshu. Yeah, Shailesh, please go ahead.
I have in the past thought very vertically, right? So here is a problem, here is a API, here is the data, here is this, connectivity and infrastructure, right? So we've thought very, very vertically about each thing that we have done so far, right? And I think now we have to turn around and think very, very horizontally and say there is a infrastructure layer which includes all the way from devices to edge to cell towers and the Wi-Fi and then the fiber and all of that and the cloud, right? So infrastructure as a service, not just for an enterprise, but for a country, right? How do we think of that? Then the next layer, how do we think of APIs of all kinds, right? This is very important. I think, reusing certain APIs for multiple use cases, right? Speech to text in Bengali can be used by Ola, Uber for their drivers, for farmers in Bengal, and for healthcare workers, right? So how do we think of reusability of APIs and making them available in a way that they are accessible to everyone? So the apps are not sitting, the APIs are also sitting on these platforms, and anybody can consume these APIs like we consume, other services, we can consume these APIs. So UPI is a great example, Aadhaar and all these are API systems. And we need like thousands of such systems to create a very large marketplace of APIs, both IT and AI APIs. And we need a way for people to both consume and produce them. So if I'm a student who does one great thing in one area, I should be able to produce that API and somebody can consume it. Once we solve that problem, then the consumers of API, the people who build solutions and apps, don't have to invent speech to text and have a data science team just for that. Ola should never have to have a data science team for speech. That's not their primary thing. They should be able to consume it, but they should be able to give delivery services to Flipkart and Amazon because they have the connectivity. So this ecosystem thinking has to start coming up. And I think that when that comes up, then we will solve the country as a whole instead of individual verticals and individual horizontals and verticals. And I think that ecosystem thinking is what we need. And emergent intelligence will happen because of that, right? We will not be able to control who is doing what eventually, but there's a new kind of intelligence that will emerge, which is beyond what any one person can imagine. And these are the new frameworks, ecosystem thinking and emergent intelligence. That is what is coming in the next 20 years. And instead of thinking of, if we enable APIs of all kinds, and that will create a revolution, and APIs at all levels, infrastructure level and AI level and IT level, at all levels, right? And that's where 5G thinking is going. That's where a lot of AI thinking is going. Everybody's putting out these APIs for everybody to consume. Okay?
Just to add, has said, the part of it is already done. If you go to apisetu.gov.in, we have published more than 1,000 APIs out there, and a lot of players, whether it's Zerodha or whether it's Upstocks or whether ICISc Securities or partners within the government, they are using the APIs. CoWIN, we have already seen, like how the certificate APIs were published in Zomato and Amazon, they all are using that, and people are building apps on top of that. If you look at the digital health mission, the Ayushman Bharat digital health mission, the sandbox that is being built there, the doctor registries, health facility registries, and the laboratory network, all of it is made available for people to build on top of it. So the role the government is doing is that the basic building blocks of the Aadhaar, the UPI, the DigiLocker, or the Ayushman Bharat Health Stack, and similar thing is coming for agriculture. So these will be made available, and on top of it, entrepreneurs and app developers can build solutions on that. And similar thing is being done by Vivek in the National Language Translation Mission. All the tools and services for language translation, including voice enablement, will be made available for everyone to access. So that is that's something which is being done. And when people start consuming the APIs and contributing to the APIs, more innovation will happen and more services will be built up.
No, this is fantastic. And so we have to think about not just becoming an app nation, but API nation in some sense. I know the time's up, but I will actually just quickly like to take some feedback from Lalitesh also on this question, because he's been trying to comment.
Abhishek summarized it wonderfully. APIs, which are ubiquitous, and some of these APIs might be on the edge, where everything becomes composed and people create solutions by themselves, I think is the future we are heading towards, and there's a lot of work to do to get there.
For this illuminating insights from all the panelists, and thanks a lot for the audience. Our time's up. I mean, I see this red, big glowing screen saying time's up. But I wish this session could go on forever. But the good part with the digital world is that at least that part can go on forever. Just to give you a perspective, we are just getting started with this problem. This panel is a way to kick off the ideation on some of the challenges, both from the technology side in terms of connectivity as well as communication we have in terms of trying to reach 2 billion plus societal scale systems. Post this session, we are going to have what we call as the innovation showcase. Some of you might have already seen, but there are a bunch of startups that ARTPARK Innovation Program has been supporting, and they will be showcasing. So if you would like to interact with them, give them your feedback, that would be fabulous. Post that session, there are three major things that are coming up. One is about healthcare. How do we take healthcare to Bharat, right? And how do we try to solve one of the big problems that Shailesh pointed out was, the diagnosis. If people are not able to diagnose, then whatever follows is actually even more of a challenge. And we have seen that, especially in COVID scenario, that's been a big challenge. Post that session, we will also be exploring one of an important perspective while we are connecting people, digitally. It's the physical connectivity also, which is very important, not just for people in the villages or tier 2 or tier 3 towns, because 40% of out of 6.5 lakh villages, they don't have physical connectivity. But even in towns like Bangalore, we somehow feel that it's difficult to get access to healthcare, in emergency scenario, and we've had some few sad examples to talk about. So they're going to explore that. Then we're also going to look at the big revolution that is shaping India, which is connecting Bharat with drones. And that is where we will be making some interesting and exciting announcement. So would love for all of you to attend that session. Then post that, we'll be talking about the inclusive learning for future. And that is a very, very important perspective. We probably have the largest number of young human brains possible. 200, 300 millions of them. How we enable them to learn is probably going to define the success of the nation. Can we, enable them to learn to introspect? Can we enable them to create things of value, not just in the physical sense, but also in the digital sense, is going to be, of course, a challenge and also a massive opportunity. So we have a panelists from around the globe talking about this problem and would love to seek your participation in that as well. So thank you. Thanks a lot. And would love to invite you to the Innovation Showcase. Thank you.